session on security and political processes is Professor C. Mohan, visiting research professor of ISAS. I shall now pass the floor to Professor Mohan.
Thank you, and I think let's get started. We had an excellent opening session this morning, which true to the billing, I think it really laid out the comprehensive assessment of the current situation. And it also touched on all the key issues that will continue to come up for discussion in the next year and a half. Now, the second session, which we're now getting into, gets down to the more specifics. And here we focused on the security and the political processes. And as you all know, that the issues that come up in the second session are going to be quite critical in the future of Afghanistan. The question of as the US and the international community end their combat role in Afghanistan by 2014 and hands over security responsibilities to Afghan National Security Forces. The question of is the ANSF ready? How is it going to deal with the situation? Will Afghanistan be able to fund it? Is there nature of the ethnic composition of the armed forces? So full range of issues come up. And the question of actually what are the different possible scenarios? Post 2014, we can even start. The second set of issues, I think, which we look ahead, is the question of the political structure itself, the nature of the political order in Afghanistan. We heard this morning, earlier session, that the question of center versus periphery, the question of dealing with the decentralization of the existing power structure, all those sets of issues, because while you create a structure, a military structure, a security structure, it can't succeed without an enabling political framework as well. So the question of how does the order evolve post-2014, that's the second issue. And the third set of issues that we have is the whole question of human rights, and the question of human security, that in this whole process, the question of the transition towards better human security, better economic security, all those issues to come up. So as you can see, we have a very youngish panel here, and I think in many ways they also represent the future of Afghanistan. So we really look forward to listening to all three of them. And let me begin by introducing three speakers very briefly, because the bios are in front of you. So I just mentioned briefly the highlights of the bio. We have at the far end Mr. Arian Sharifi, who has a very interesting, very diverse background. He's worked he's currently a Chief Financial Officer of the Afghan Financial Services. He's a research analyst at the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point in the United States. And he has followed and tracked the whole the ideological arguments and the stuff that the Haqqani Network and others have been putting out in Pakistan. And he has a background as both in the media and in public affairs and media outreach. So we have someone with a very diverse and very interesting background. And Mr. Sharifi is going to speak on security in Afghanistan beyond 2014 and the readiness of the Afghan National Security Forces. The second speaker we have is Ahmad Masoud. Here again is the president of the Masoud Foundation. He's served in the Afghan diplomatic corps. He's been ambassador to London, and he brings expansive experience both as a journalist and as a functionary of the state in Afghanistan. And he's going to speak on the nature of the political reform and the peace building in Afghanistan. And then, last but not the least, we have Mr. Najeeb Manalai, who is now Human Rights Officer at the Human Rights Unit of the UNAMA, or the United Nations Commission for Assistance in Afghanistan. And he too has a fairly diverse background and brings a rich experience to deal with the questions of human rights, human security, and economic development in Afghanistan. So all three of them will speak for about 20 minutes each. So I will remind each one of them around the 18th minute that we can keep this on track, because as the evening wears on, it's going to be hard to keep the audience. So 20 minutes each, and then we'll open up for questions and answers. We'll start with Mr. Sharifi.
Thank you, Dr. Mohan. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity to share with you my thoughts on the security aspects of the transition process in Afghanistan. This is on? Okay. Since I have a limited time slot, and I was just reminded of it, I will get directly to the point. But before doing so, I would like to just simply remind you that some of the issues that I will be talking about have already been mentioned, so if you get bored with my repetitions, please excuse me with that. To start with, I believe that the phenomenon of transition and the withdrawal deadline of the international security forces from Afghanistan by 2014 has been vastly misinterpreted by many observers, particularly by the media. Generally, these misinterpretations occur in two main areas, in my view. First, there is an embedded assumption that in most media discussions that 2014 will be the end of the international forces mission in Afghanistan. I've heard many commentators say that 2014 Afghanistan will be left on its own and the international community will cut all or most of its assistance to the country. This is not a realistic perception, however. Many coalition and NATO countries have already declared their long-term commitments to Afghanistan. Based on these commitments, international assistance to the Afghan security forces will continue well beyond 2014. I will attend to this issue with more detail later. The other misinterpretation is that many observers ask the question as to whether or not the Afghan security forces would be able to provide security for the country after 2014. Now, the phrase providing security, in my view, is too broad. It can mean everything from partial stability in major cities to complete security across the country. It encompasses the handling of threats posed by foreign adversarial countries, by international terrorist groups, by domestic insurgent fighters, by large organized criminal networks, as well as by petty criminals. To assume that the Afghan security forces would be able to secure the Afghan populace at large against threats posed by all of these sources would be a misguided assumption. We have never had in Afghanistan a security force of such high form, and most likely we will not have it for many years to come. Even with over 140,000 Western troops in the country right now, such level of security does not exist. Therefore, in my view, we need to rephrase our question and decrease our expectations of the Afghan security forces to a more realistic level. As such, we need to be concerned with a more pressing issue, which is the survival of the regime beyond 2014. That, in my view, is the real question which I will turn to now. I believe we need to ask ourselves whether or not the current political regime, and I do not mean the current administration, but the process and ideals upon which the Afghan political system was established in the late 2001 can survive beyond 2014. Observing the discussions in the Afghan as well as some of the international media outlets, I've seen four broad scenarios speculated for Afghanistan after 2014. Number one, soon after 2014, the government in Kabul collapses and the Taliban takes over, as the Afghan security forces would not be able to withstand the increased attacks by the insurgents. Two, with the security vacuum created by the withdrawal of the international forces, former jihadi groups start struggling for power, the central government collapses, and a civil war follows. Three, the central government survives for 2 to 3 years after 2014, as with the Soviet withdrawal in 1989. But insurgent attacks increase, power struggle between the jihadi groups rise, and eventually the central government collapses. The country would be once again divided, with some of the jihadi groups forming an alliance in the north, while the Taliban establishing a government in the south and in the east. And the fourth scenario maintains that with financial, strategic, and advisory support provided by the international community, the Afghan security forces will be able to preserve the current regime in the country for the medium term, despite the potential rising levels of insurgent attacks. I think the latter scenario, the fourth one, to be more plausible for many reasons. The first reason is that even after 2014, a considerable number of international troops will remain in Afghanistan. Many of our international partners, including the United States, Great Britain, France, Germany, and others, have already declared that they would retain their military presence in Afghanistan beyond 2014. Most likely, the international military involvement in Afghanistan will be based on bilateral strategic agreements between Afghanistan and these countries. The negotiations on the Afghan-American Strategic Partnership Agreement resumed last month, and it's ongoing as we speak. There, of course, are such critical issues as the conducting of 9 operations, the leading of military operations by the Afghan security forces, and the control of prisons, and many more issues that need to be addressed and agreed upon. But since this partnership agreement would result in mutual benefit for Afghanistan and the United States, it will be inked one way or another. In addition to the strategic partnership with the United States, President Karzai is scheduled to travel to several European countries during this month to kickstart negotiations on partnership agreements with many European countries. The bottom line is that Afghanistan will not be left alone after 2014, and that a considerable number of Western troops will remain in the country for the foreseeable future. How would this help with the security situation in Afghanistan? Well, in my view, it can help in many ways as follows. A, the presence of international forces, even if with a limited number of troops on the Afghan soil, would deter any potential, albeit not probable, invasion by one of Afghanistan's neighbors. However, as I said, the chances of Afghanistan being directly invaded by one of its neighbors are very, very slim. Nevertheless, the stationing of Western troops in Afghanistan through strategic partnership agreements would completely take that threat off the table, as the responsibility of the defense of Afghanistan's border would certainly be part of these agreements. This would substantially ease the burden of responsibility on the shoulders of the Afghan security forces, at least for the medium term. B, the presence of Western troops in Afghanistan would prevent the possibility of the breakout of factional fightings in the country and the potential toppling of the regime by one or more of the former jihadi groups. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest fears of most Afghans is that the jihadi groups might once again throw the country into the flames of factional fighting as they did in the 1990s. But with Western troops in the country, this threat would be substantially reduced, for they would continue to support the central government. C, the presence of Western troops in Afghanistan would also prevent the possibility of the Taliban taking over the country and establishing their own government. While the Taliban could become stronger and their attacks could increase, with a considerable number of Western troops in the country, the Taliban's total victory would be inconceivable. And D, the international forces would continue to provide the Afghan security forces with training, guidance, and assistance while conducting operations. The Afghan security forces would take the lead, and the international troops would provide the needed strategic and tactical assistance to them. They would also continue to support the Afghan National Army and the Afghan National Police. The second reason for why I believe that the Afghan security forces would be able to help preserve the regime in the country after 2014 is that the coalition countries, particularly the United States, will continue to provide financial assistance to Afghanistan for the foreseeable future. The Afghan Ministry of Defense estimates their financial needs between $5 to $7 billion per year after 2014. And they say that they are confident, based on verbal agreements, at least for now, that they would receive that amount from the international community for many years to come. Currently, the presence of the international military forces in Afghanistan costs about $150 billion per year. With a little over 140,000 troops in the country, that is roughly about $1 million per soldier per year. If we assume that by 2014, troop levels would be reduced to about 40,000, that will allow for a cost cutting of over $100 billion per year for the international community. And as such, providing $5 to $7 billion every year as assistance to the Afghan security forces would not be much of a burden for the international community. Finally, the third reason for my case is that the Afghan security forces are growing rapidly in number and quality. By 2014, there will be a good enough force capable of defending and preserving the regime. By October 2014, the combined Afghan National Army and Afghan National Police are foreseen to have a force of 352,000 personnel. While this number is still considerably lower than the recommended number of 20 security personnel for every 1,000 population in insurgency environments, it will be good enough to provide general security and preserve the regime. There are some worrying points, however. The Afghan security forces at present lack an air force, as well as the capabilities of heavy weaponry and equipment. So far, only 5 to 10% of what could be considered a modest air force has been established. And these statistics have to do primarily with personnel training and nothing else. There are no radar and air defense capabilities. The ANA lacks tanks, artillery, and other such equipment. But the international community and international security forces seem to have become more serious about providing equipment and training for the Afghan security forces. Their efforts at equipping and training the Afghan security forces have considerably increased since the 2014 deadline was set. Further, with the type of missions that the Afghan security forces are expected to conduct for many years to come, for example, mostly counterinsurgency operations, not a lot of heavy military equipment are needed. What is needed for such type of warfare is light and robust units that can move in and out of missions with ease and have defensive capabilities against light, swift insurgent attacks. And that is what the Afghan security forces are being trained and equipped for. Challenges. From what I've talked so far, I'm sure you've figured out that I have quite a lot of optimism about the capabilities of the Afghan security forces and the survivability of the Afghan political regime beyond 2014. However, there are several issues that could potentially undermine the scenario I just outlined. Some of these issues include the following. A, the potential total withdrawal of the international forces at a time considered too soon from Afghanistan. I believe and we assume that some international forces will remain in Afghanistan for several years after 2014. But of course, that depends on many things, to include the level of political will in the capitals of these countries. If for some reason the international forces leave Afghanistan earlier than they should, my hypothesis would not hold and that the Afghan government could collapse. B, cutting off financial assistance to Afghanistan too soon. Like the presence of the international forces in the country beyond 2014, we are working with the assumption that the international financial assistance to Afghanistan will also continue for the foreseeable future. Should the reality turn out to be otherwise, my scenario will not hold. C, leaving Afghanistan to its neighbors. Unfortunately, we do not have very cooperative neighbors. They will still continue to meddle in Afghanistan's internal affairs. Therefore, if they are given more leeway in Afghanistan, the Afghan government would become even weaker and the possibility of its collapse would increase. And D, the possibility of major popular uprisings in the country. At the moment, the gap between the Afghan government and its people is quite wide and it's increasing. If the Afghan government is not able to introduce some major improvements in some of the main areas of its conduct, i.e. curbing corruption, decreasing the production and trade of narcotics, improving the rule of law, providing basic social services for the people and others, it is possible that we experience some major uprisings against the government. That would considerably weaken the government, further tarnish its legitimacy, as well as the legitimacy of the international forces, and would create large support for the insurgents' cause. There, of course, are more threats, but I only highlighted a few major points. And to conclude, I must emphasize that the transition of responsibilities to the Afghan security forces should be considered a positive sign. If Afghanistan is ever to stand on its own feet and provide the needed security for its population, it can only be realized through taking full responsibility. As the saying goes, one only learns how to swim by swimming, so would the Afghan security forces learn how to provide security for Afghanistan only with becoming responsible for it. But until we fully become capable of defending ourselves, we will have the international community on our side. As Dr. Ahmad, the head of the Transition Commission said, and I quote, "The transfer of security responsibility is not the end, but the deepening of the mutual partnership between Afghanistan and the international community," unquote. As such, 2014 would mark the beginning of a new era of cooperation between Afghanistan and its international partners. Both sides have great responsibilities to fulfill in this new era. On the one hand, the international community must maintain its declared commitment to Afghanistan and continue to provide strategic, advisory, financial, and tactical support to the Afghan security forces. On the other hand, the Afghan government must work to bring about better governance, curb corruption, curb the production and trade of narcotics, better its relations with its neighbors, and provide a better environment for investment and economic development in the country. The fulfillment of the parties' respective responsibilities will determine the fate of Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sharifi. Thanks for that precise presentation, as well as sticking to your time, your 20 minutes. Now we'll ask Masoud.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let me first thank the Institute of Salvation Studies for inviting me here, especially Dr. Shanti, who kindly invited me to participate in this very useful workshop. And also, let me say to Dr. Mohan that I'm not that young either. But 2001, early 2001, for the first time when Mr. Karzai, the president of Afghanistan, came to London to tell me that he wanted to go to Afghanistan to see what he can do with the political landscape in Afghanistan. So he was quite unfamiliar with Afghanistan that time. Then, of course, I assisted him to go to Afghanistan, but instead he went to Quetta, to Pakistan, to stay there until my late brother Masoud was assassinated, as he was the leader of the resistance that time. So therefore, I'm quite old in that sense. Can I just come here that when we talk about reform, especially that I have asked the organizer to give me a chance to add the peace as well, because in Afghanistan, reform and peace goes together. If we have a historical side of the situation, we can see that Afghanistan problem have not reappeared just 30 years ago. It has been there throughout its history. So that is not a very recent problem. Yes, of course, we know that Pakistan have played a very destructive role in Afghanistan, especially to see its strategy in Afghanistan succeed. Yes, in the past, we have had many other players who have played destructive role in Afghanistan. So therefore, Afghan problem is not a today problem or yesterday problem. It is a problem of the history. So that is why we are witnessing a historical failure in the part of Afghanistan. As in the 18th century, 19th century, there were two players in the great game. It was the British in subcontinent of India and then the Russian. But today, Afghanistan, there are many players in Afghanistan, many centers of power. So therefore, although the situation is very complicated, but I believe that the solution to solve the problem in Afghanistan, it appears to be more evident, more clear than ever before. Because if you live throughout the history with such a situation, so then of course you learn from the history. So therefore you can give a solution how to solve the problem in that country. That is why I have put the two together, peace and reform, and political reform in Afghanistan. Going towards 2014, I believe that the Afghan government as well as the international community have lost many golden opportunities, almost 10 years gone, and I believe that that was a very vital and golden opportunity for all of us. But unfortunately, due to an dysfunction and effective government under Mr. Karzai, we lost those opportunities. And of course, the Western world did not know Afghanistan very well, and that was another reason why we lost the opportunities. In order to come to the point that I really want to raise in this workshop, let me touch upon very briefly the history of Afghanistan. Because for the participant here, I'm pretty sure that many of you do understand the history of Afghanistan. But if I could just touch upon, in case to remind once more, what exactly has happened in Afghanistan and why we are in this situation today. If we begin from the establishment of Afghanistan, mid-17th century, and we go to 18th century, we are witnessing a rivalry amongst the Afghan elite. That has really kind of been the cornerstone of the Afghan history. We have witnessed rivalry amongst Afghan elite. For example, in the 18th century, we are witnessing that between the two tribes of Saruzai and Barakzai, there were for 40 years this sort of rivalry. And why I mention this rivalry, why is that important? Because of these rivalries, Afghanistan never had a chance to make the institutions which were required to really get the participation of the people of Afghanistan. Those rivalries were based either on ethnic supremacy or a personal agenda or individual politics. Therefore, we can see that the rivalry really made a cornerstone of the history of Afghanistan. Because of that rivalry, we can see that the regional power, either from the south, west, northeast, they also came to play inside Afghanistan. Once one part could not resist the other, asked for the help from a neighboring country. So the neighboring country were more than happy to come and assist that specific group. And in that way, we can see that Afghanistan became a field for the regional rivalry as well. And eventually we can see that the big invasion happened as we witnessed the Red Army's invasion in Afghanistan, and we witnessed the global terrorism in Afghanistan, and today we see the Americans there. So of course, all of that, because the main problem there in Afghanistan, which has existed throughout the history, that was rivalry amongst different factions of Afghanistan. And let's go continue with that, why this rivalry happened in Afghanistan? What was the problem? The problem in Afghanistan, you can see there was a system, a very centralized system. I do agree with Dr. Jalali that Afghanistan politics in nature, it is a decentralized. And Afghanistan can never remember a sort of centralized state throughout its history. But the problem existed that successive governments in Afghanistan, they attempted to bring a sort of centralized government, and they could not do it. Only with some foreign power, they could do it up to a very short period of time. Then they could not do it. And that was the main reason why the others came up to challenge the establishment, because there was one system which could retain all the power for itself. Even today, that's the problem. The problem continues to be the case. They're the same. There's not much difference. You can see 2001, when there was consensus amongst different Afghan factions and Bonn, when they came to Afghanistan and they gave hope to the Afghan people. And there was some sort of a real hope that something could really prevail. But as soon as Mr. Karzai took his grip on power, he started to alienate and to really take the risk and isolate the others out of the political landscape of Afghanistan. So therefore, we can see today that it's not only the armed opposition, so-called Taliban, but there are other opposition who are political opposition. So the rivalry still exists there. Coming to the Taliban and Mr. Karzai's peace with Taliban, of course, let me say from the beginning that we do agree with peace. We do support peace. And that is why the Afghan nation have given so much sacrifice to bring peace to Afghanistan. But the main problem is that what sort of peace do you really want to bring here? What we have seen for the past years, so-called peace process in Afghanistan, that have been surely a political agenda by Mr. Karzai to give a sort of pretext for his own failure in the part of governance in Afghanistan, not a peace, a genuine peace process in Afghanistan. That is why we can see that that process have not yet succeeded, and I do not want to be pessimistic, but I believe that that will not succeed. I know that since the peace process has started in Afghanistan, it has been at a great cost. We have lost many people in Afghanistan. There have been a chain of killing. Every single day, there are men and women and children of Afghanistan who are being killed in the street because of the Taliban onslaught there. But to give a sort of false hope that the peace will yield a result, I don't think if that's the way we can go to peace. Yes, we do support peace. We can achieve peace if we are strong. A fragile and weakening and dysfunctional government cannot be a good institution to bring peace to Afghanistan. Especially that now the Taliban knows that 2014 is nearing. So therefore, they will not be there to make peace with this government, as they have not done it for the past 17 years. For the past 17 years, they have not even been ready to negotiate, let alone to make peace. So therefore, we are far away from peace, especially that every involved party, let it be Afghan or foreigner, they have got their own interpretation of peace. For example, the Americans have got their own interpretation. Pakistan have got, as my sister explained, their own interpretation of peace. As she explained that Pakistan is support the peace process, I wonder that why Pakistan do not support that peace process inside Pakistan. That from 2008 to 2011, according to the statistic, they have killed almost 88,000 so-called Taliban in Pakistan, but at the same time they want to promote a sort of peace in Afghanistan. It's a contradictory policies which exist in Pakistan itself. Yes, we do support peace. But peace, how it would come? Let me say a couple. First, we have to have a strong government. Second, in order to have a strong government, we have to have a political reform in the structure of the government. Third, we have to have sort of balanced regional policy in the region itself. Fourth, as our friends were discussing about this strategic pact with the United States of America, on one hand, yes, people of Afghanistan need that sort of pact. But on the other hand, do we know that what would be the reaction of the neighboring countries here? And we have got almost 6 neighbors there, and each of them have got their own legitimate and illegitimate interests in Afghanistan. So therefore, we have to be a bit careful about that one. I just go very quickly about this piece with Taliban. We have got very different values and opinion, very different from the Taliban itself. For example, if I can count a few of them, why the peace would not happen with Taliban. That one, they are extreme, but the people of Afghanistan, they are moderate. Two, they are part of Al-Qaeda, but people of Afghanistan are fighting against Al-Qaeda. Three, they are drug-related group. People of Afghanistan do not want that to happen. Four, they do not believe in today's human values, for example, in democracy, in human rights, in women's rights, in education for women, in many other human values. They don't believe. They think that they are un-Islamic according to their own version. So they believe that they have to fight until the end. That is a holy war for them. Therefore, when they do go and put a bomb on the road, on the street, on the mosque, regardless of being Muslim or non-Muslim, they think that that is a very holy war. They have to continue until the end, until the victory has been achieved. And fifth, the government of Afghanistan is deeply corrupt and fragile. A very corrupt government we have got in Afghanistan. Let me say to the friends and participant audience here that if we have the sort of government in Afghanistan, which is ultra-centralized system, which every power is in the hand of one man, and it's the president, appointing the governor, appointing the minister, and approving the budget. Almost everything is in the hand of one man, and that one man does not have the capacity to really rule and run and control the whole thing. And how exactly we can expect that that sort of government, which is deeply corrupt, can deal with a force so-called Taliban, which has got a very global vision, not only Afghanistan, but a very global vision of being victorious in their own thought. So that's why I do not see a sort of very connection between the two. So while they are the set values of Taliban, now the people of Afghanistan, as I mentioned, they are moderate, they believe in democracy, they believe in human rights, and men's rights, and women's rights. So therefore, how exactly to act them together? How exactly you put them together to say that one side is the very corrupt government of Mr. Karzai, and the other side is a terrorist group called Taliban. If you put the two together, how exactly you can give a message of peace to the people of Afghanistan? I don't know how to do that. I'm sorry to be a bit very undiplomatic, but it's a reality. Why I say this one? Because I have lived with it. We have lived with it. I've had the privilege to be a member of the resistance group against the Taliban. So there we have lived with the politics of Afghanistan for decades. So we should not really kind of, yes, of course, we can present that nice recipes and as well, that will happen. But that will not happen. Let me say that it was 2006 that my late brother Masoud, who was the leader of the resistance, he took a very courageous step to go to the Taliban council in the adjacent province, to go to them and to tell them, please, come to make peace. And he risked his life to go there. And when he came back, he was very disappointed. Only a few years later, he was assassinated by the same Taliban. Look at the case of Professor Afghani. Sorry, 1996. Sorry. Look at the case of Professor Wali, who was the head of Peace Council. And he was promoting peace, a genuine peace. But at the end of the day, somebody comes in the name of so-called peace and assassinates Afghani. Like that, there are many others who have been assassinated. So therefore, I just want to go very fast and to come to the point is that how exactly you can make peace with them. Now, I'm not saying that we do not have no other alternative. Of course, we have got the option, and I will come to that one. And the option is that, as I mentioned, that you know that when NATO realized that in Bosnia they could not go ahead anymore, so therefore they started sort of political reform suitable to the political structure of Bosnia. So they succeeded. So when we say that the roadmap is somewhat wrong and we cannot succeed for 10 years with the support of the international community, we could not succeed in our aim to root out terrorism, which was promised in Bonn 1, to bring reconstruction in Afghanistan, which was promised in Bonn 1, to bring sort of democracy, which would be suitable to the Afghan, which was promised in many things which we really promised in Conference of Bonn in 2001. We today, unfortunately, many of those promises have gone in vain. We have not seen that one with all the support. So therefore, we really that something must be wrong. And that I pointed out that that is what I call a very historical problem that we have got. And that is the cause of historical failure of Afghanistan, and that is the system that we have got, the political system we have had in Afghanistan that has been wrong. That has caused rivalry, that has caused corruption, that has caused dysfunctional government, weak government. We really have to change that one. For the first time, we really have to trust the people of Afghanistan. We can change it if we started today, for example, from 2012 to 2014, it's almost 3 years. If we really do not go for very substantial reform, we cannot really sustain ourselves in 2014. I'm not really sure whether 2014 we will see a sort of government in Kabul. This government will collapse, there's no doubt. And as my colleague pointed out, many other achievements which we have got during the past 10 years, they will go in vain as well. That has happened in Afghanistan before. So therefore, I'm afraid that if we do not do something now, in 2014, these achievements will go in vain as well. So the reform starts from where? Today we have got a constitution. This constitution have not been implemented fully by this government of Mr. Karzai. How exactly we can start? For example, if we really start from a very highly centralized system to decentralize somehow, or to lessen centralized power in the hand of one man, from the hand of one man, then we can succeed. How we can do that one? For example, the provincial government, the provincial council that we have got is still, the authority of the provincial council have not been clear. What exactly is the power of the provincial council? It's still, the district council have not had their own election. It's still, we do not have the constitutional Jirga, which is the very supreme body to decide upon the very big national issue in Afghanistan. Not to forget, to not make a mistake between constitutional Jirga, which is based on the constitution of Afghanistan, and illegal traditional Jirga of Mr. Karzai, who convened just a few months ago. That was illegal. That was illegal. That was not based on the constitution. That wanted for their own sort of political game or political interest. That was illegal. So we have to really kind of make a very distinct difference. Now, let me say that when we start this sort of reform, we can start it from giving the provincial council the power, making the district election, and establishing the proper constitutional Jirga. We can go for the election of the mayor in Afghanistan. We can make a separation of power between the three pillars of the state, between the government, executive, legislature, and the parliament itself, the judiciary. We have to make a very separate separation between the three pillars. But today, although we do have the parliament, although we do have the judiciary, but that is somehow the parliament is very fragile, and the executive have influenced that parliament. Today, the parliament cannot deliver. Judiciary is the servant of the politician in Afghanistan. Still, no one can remember if the judiciary in Afghanistan have ever disagreed with the president. Judiciary have never disagreed with the president. So therefore, we really have to reform that one. Once we go for sort of reform, as I mentioned, then we can go for the change of the system itself. The ultra-centralized presidential system in Afghanistan do not work. 10 years have proven that does not work. So therefore, we really have to change it to parliamentary system. So therefore, when we talk about decentralization, we can start from the center and then we can go to the provinces. In the center, we can introduce a parliamentary system to bring a sort of check and balance. And in the provinces, we can go in the next step to have elected governors. Why we should not have elected governors in Afghanistan? Why we do not trust the people of Afghanistan? The people of Afghanistan who have sacrificed their life to defend this country for all the century. So therefore, we really have to go and trust these people and to give them, to empower them, to give them the power to elect their own governor, their own district officer, their own mayor. So therefore, we have to start the decentralization two parts. The central to introduce a parliamentary system, and the provinces to go for the election of the mayor and governor. Well, I do not have much time, and thank you very much. I hope that I have contributed in your discussion. Thank you.